Welcome back to the Diet Diaries. I am very excited today. I have a really special guest. You guys know I don't bring guests on very often. And when I do, they are always someone who's very meaningful and who I know is going to add a lot to kind of like the conversation and the space that we have here. I'm with Stephanie Brinker, who is a former client and someone that we work together. It's been quite some time since we finished up, but we stay in touch and we have conversations. And we had a conversation about a podcast I did towards the end of last year about an influencer who had plastic surgery. And I was talking about kind of my thoughts on it. And Stephanie texted me and started sharing all of her thoughts. And I was like, do you want to do a podcast on this and like make this like a public conversation? And she's like, yes, totally. So here we are. I'm going to let Stephanie kind of introduce herself. And I figured we could start off by talking a little bit about what your kind of like what your struggles were that brought you to coaching, because I think that kind of really informs a lot of like what you and I were talking about in relation to the podcast. And we can kind of go from there.
Sure.
Sound good?
Great.
Okay.
All right. Perfect. So, what brought me to you and the podcast? So, I would say I probably had a good dose of body dysmorphia. So, it was a combination of that and maybe just having too much food noise
Hmm.
and using food to feed my feelings. Maybe there was a little bit of alcohol involved too, because of course that numbs the food choices I'm
Hmm.
making.
Hmm.
And while I knew I wasn't, according to any medical chart, large, I just didn't want it to be such a focus in my life anymore. And it
Hmm.
was sort of balancing, how do I correct my own behaviors so I can, I suppose, be prouder of myself, would be
Hmm.
the way I would say it.
Yeah. Yeah. And that makes me think of like being more in alignment like with your values, like taking action in a way that's actually a reflection of who you are as a person versus like the noise, the external expectations and pressures and all of that.
Yeah, and I think before I started the work, so I sort of started on my own.
Hmm.
I sort of decided I needed to deprogram myself. And actually, what started it really was Jamila Jamil did
Hmm.
a whole thing about, I think it was called hashtag I Weigh. And it's morphed into something else. But it was this whole idea that she saw this Kardashian expose and there were numbers over the women, and of course they're billionaires, and whatever you think about them personally, it's totally irrelevant to this
Hmm.
conversation. But they have made something of their lives and have these businesses, and those numbers were not about their billion-dollar businesses or what they've created, but rather their weight, and how it's almost like a trick that we play on women.
Hmm.
So if they're so distracted by their appearance and their weight, then they're not focusing on advancing their business, or they're not putting that energy into something else that's, frankly, a lot more worthwhile. And
Yeah.
so that's what started my journey, because I was like many people, and I don't want to judge anyone and say that you're messed up, but I stepped on the scale too often. I had a Fitbit. It was a Fitbit at that time, not an Apple Watch. And I counted my steps and the calories so I can make sure that I burnt off the cookie.
Hmm.
I avoided carbs. I mean, I never wore shorts. I mean, there were all these things and stories I was telling myself, and it
Hmm.
just took up time.
Yeah. Like brain time and brain space. Then that's taking away time and brain space from other things in your life that actually are kind of worthy of that energy and attention.
Yeah. And I felt like I started making progress, but I needed help. And that's how I found you.
How did you I'm curious to hear more or for you to share like how you did some of that work on your own. Like what were some of the things that you actually did or thought about or took action on, because I think that it's hard. It's hard to do that totally on your own and to kind of like know where to start or what to do.
Yeah, that's a great question. So I think the impetus is the fact that I'm a mom of two girls.
Okay.
And at the time, my older daughter was becoming a teenager, and I had two friends who were starting a business. And as part of their business that was dedicated to teenage girls or preteens, they had, I don't know, like a dietitian or something. And there were things that they started to post. And one of the things that they posted was about having a, I don't know if the language was body positive home, but that's what started it. And
Okay.
so I started to follow this woman, not a huge, social media person, but what I did as a first step was I curated my feed.
Hmm.
So as much as you get all of these things and they're sending you, okay, it's Valentine's Day and don't eat a chocolate strawberry because it's less than eating the bar of
Hmm.
chocolate, or it's Halloween, or it's Thanksgiving, or it's whatever, and then they want you on a cleanse. I just wrote not interested, not interested, not interested, not interested. And you can
Hmm.
actually, Jamil said how you can change settings in Instagram.
Hmm.
I don't remember at the time,
Hmm.
to not get ads focused on diet. I stopped following a lot of the female, I don't know, exercisers that would post their workouts or post their
Hmm.
food. That
Hmm.
for me was not healthy.
Yeah.
And I actually started following some men,
Hmm.
because then I stopped trying to aspire to be something. It was
Yes.
about something else. And
Yes.
it had to become about the fitness or the habits as opposed to an output. And
Yes.
so by doing that, I learned a lot. And then from there, that led to, there were episodes where people would speak online and they would say things like, if this episode was about, or this stream was about arms, if someone doesn't like their arms, then they cover up their arms in
Hmm.
summer.
Hmm.
And then it reinforces the point that you're not worthy to show your arms when it's
Yes.
101-degree day. I didn't have
Yes.
that issue with arms, but I felt that way about my legs, that I have
Hmm.
cellulite and I never wore shorts. Now, I want to preface this by saying I was a size 4 at the time.
Okay.
Could be, it doesn't matter if I'm 113 pounds, 118 pounds, 123 pounds at the time.
Hmm.
I wouldn't wear shorts. That's
Hmm.
crazy.
Hmm.
And so at some point, as I got older, and I think I thank middle age for this, there's something that happens when you enter, around your 50s,
Hmm.
45 to 50. I saw things differently. And I'm like, I don't know if I'm allowed to curse, but basically
Yes, you
like,
can. Please do.
day. I'm like, fuck that.
Yes.
I'm going hiking and it's hot and I'm going to wear
Wear
shorts.
shorts. Yeah.
And that was the beginning.
I so appreciate you. Well, I mean, a lot of things you said, but kind of working backwards, being willing to, and referencing like the size of clothing that you took at that time, because I think there's this perception that amongst women that if I am a size X, and certainly I think a size 4 is one of those sizes that people aspire to be, I will love my body, I will be thin, I will be happy, I will look great. And you sharing that, I think, opens up the door to realize that it's not about the size of your body. It's not about the tag and the clothes. It's about the thought patterns that you have. And those can happen at any size, at any shape. And that if you are thinking those thoughts, whether you take a size 2 or a size 12 or a size 20 or whatever it is, there is work to be done, because there's a reliance on what we look like for our happiness and our self-worth. And things like cellulite and where we carry body fat and where we gain muscle are all things that are completely dictated by genetics and things that we can't control. And the idea that we are allowing ourselves to place our self-worth and our happiness on something that we can't control, like, blows my mind, and we don't even realize that we're doing that. And that's why I always like to articulate that. But I think that there's such this myth that if I am a size X, I'll be happy, and it's just not true. So you sharing that, I think, is so valuable for so many people listening. So I just wanted to kind of like spend a moment on that and highlight the importance of that for people.
Yeah, I think it's not just happiness. I had this messed up equation between thin and success,
Hmm.
right? So growing up in high school, the popular girls were all thin, and those were the
Hmm.
girls that the boys liked. And
Hmm.
um, I think there's that, right? Or there was this
Yep.
notion after I gave birth, like, oh, look, she's really on top of it because she can be a mom of 2 girls and she runs this business
Hmm.
and, she
Looks a certain way.
looks a certain way and is always put together and she's
Yep.
so fit or whatever.
Hmm.
I will say, as a human being, I have a tremendous amount of energy. And I've always loved exercise. So exercise for me was not as much. I mean, yes, there was always, of course, a physical aspect of it. But if I don't exercise on a regular basis, I'm cranky, I'm irritable, I'm stressed. So there is like a direct correlation between exercise and my happiness.
Hmm.
I don't for me at my size, I don't know if I find that it impacts my weight, especially um, now that I'm a little older,
Mhm.
right? So going through menopause. So there's different challenges as you get older. So I try to do different things, but I found a much stronger correlation between what I'm eating
Mhm.
and the weight. But at this point in my life, my weight is status quo. And the
Mhm.
thing is that I gave myself milestones, right? So if I used to step on the scale all the time, I stopped. If I stopped wearing a Fitbit, right? Because I found that it was creating a lot of noise in my head. Even Facebook, I went off Facebook because I was not interested in comparing myself to others. And
Mhm.
like I give anybody kudos if they say that they went on Facebook and didn't, look up somebody, or I don't care
Mhm.
if you're seeing, oh, look, she just ran a marathon after having her baby, or she just
Mhm.
got promoted after 2 months being in the job.
Yes.
There's always something there. And so
Yeah.
I just shut those things down.
Mm. What was it like for you to stop getting on the scale? Like, was it like a cold turkey thing where you're like, one day I'm just not doing this, or did you kind of wean yourself off? Like, what was the approach you took, and what was that experience like, kind of mentally?
It was a really conscious choice. And I don't think it happens slowly over time. So
Okay.
when you start to do the work, sometimes you don't know if you're achieving anything until you see a milestone.
Yes.
So in the
Yep.
beginning, it's hard. And I want to clarify what I talk about as a milestone. A milestone is not a number on a scale. It's not fit, like that's not the goal. The goal is to have a healthier relationship with myself, my
Mhm.
body, uh, so that I can be a better role model for my girls.
Mhm.
It's not to be, it's to be less preoccupied. I wanted to be able to go out for dinner
Mhm.
and you order what you want. You eat when you're hungry, you stop when you're not. This
Yes.
idea that there are bad foods or good foods, I inherently do not believe that. Anyone who knows me knows I think a burger is a perfect food. It has
Yeah.
tons of protein.
Yeah.
So it is a slow process and it happens over time. And so maybe
Mhm.
I went from stepping on the scale 7 days a week to 5 days a week.
Mhm.
And then I don't even know if there's a regular cadence now.
Okay.
Um, I am bigger now, by the
Mhm.
way. I don't correlate it to that. I pretty
Mhm.
much do the same things I always have. The biggest
Mhm.
difference between now and then is that I've entered menopause.
Mhm.
So I think first, maybe it was menopause, but I thought it was craziness or anxiety or whatever. So I
Mhm.
tried Lexapro. So I had gained quite a bit of weight for Lexapro and I didn't love that. I ended up switching. Now I'm on Cymbalta.
Okay.
It's helped me tremendously. And so whether it really was perimenopausal symptoms that could have been helped with hormone replacement therapy, I'll never know. But
Right.
now I'm on hormone replacement therapy. So the
Okay.
combination of these anti anxiety meds,
Mhm.
which I love, just, do I want to be happy and a little heavier? Or do I want to be skinny and miserable? Right.
Yeah.
So I choose happy and I would lie to you if I said I wish it didn't, cause me to gain the 10 pounds.
Right.
I go back and forth deciding, you know what? I'm 51 years old. I don't look so bad. Like I
Mhm.
actually look pretty good
Mhm.
versus am I really doing everything I can? So the work doesn't stop, right? It just
Yes.
occupies less time in my head. And sometimes I'm like, I get dressed up, I'm going to a bat mitzvah, and I'm like, you know what? I look pretty good.
Yeah.
Clothing comes in all different shapes and sizes. And by the way, a tailor can let something out as much as they can let something in.
Yes. I think, like, again, like you sharing the meds you've taken to help support your mental health and the physical changes that have happened as a byproduct of that. I like the transparency of that is so important because I think there's a lot of shame that women carry around the things they need to do and what happens to their body, and am I the only one going through this? Um, and your ability to say, I'd rather be a little bit heavier and happy than skinny and miserable, right? Is such a is such like a shift and a transformation from however many years ago, right, when the number on the scale and being in a smaller size was like the most important thing, right? That was the priority. And so to be able to be in this place now where you're like, okay, the scale's up. Am I thrilled about it? No. Am I able to accept it? Yes. And it's like you and I have talked about, and I remember in some of our texts when we were talking about the podcast around this idea of like body acceptance. And accepting doesn't mean that you love everything about that number or your appearance or whatever it is. And so I guess I'd love to hear from you, like what, maybe this is kind of like a big question, but like what does that acceptance piece mean for you? And how do you, to your point, the work is ongoing. How do you kind of work with that or kind of like negotiate with that on like a daily basis in terms of like getting dressed? And I know like you love clothes and getting dressed and shopping and all that. I would love to actually hear more about that too. I'm kind of bringing up multiple topics, but around this idea of acceptance, like what does that mean for you now, kind of on like a day-to-day basis?
So I think the biggest thing I would sum up is this is in the mantra that I started to tell myself in the process, and I say it to my girls too, because even though we're not supposed to tell our daughters that they're pretty or whatever, like, I still do
Hmm.
sometimes. And I tell them that, oh my God, you look so good. But by the way, your looks don't define you. And it's the least interesting thing about you. And
Yes.
that it's that line. So there's two things I think of, right? So wouldn't this is going to come off arrogant, maybe, I don't know, but I would like to think that I am more interesting than what I look like,
Hmm.
and that the number on the scale does not impact, by the way, how if I lost the 10 pounds, and I don't even think my husband noticed, but if I lost the 10 pounds, he's not going to love me anymore. He's not going to be any more attracted to
Hmm.
me.
Hmm.
My kids won't love me more.
Hmm.
Right. And so you sit there and you say to yourself, you know what, like I'm enough as I am.
Hmm.
And so you're sort of shifting your why. But that is the number one takeaway I would say for me has been this is the least, what I look like is the least interesting thing about me. And that allows me to be hopefully interesting in other ways,
Hmm.
interesting in the choices I make with respect to my life. And, I went from working full time, 70 hours a week, and I started my own company, and now I work freelance. And so that gives me opportunity to pursue purpose driven work, whether it's, high school girl related or supporting Jewish students in college, right? So those are the things that make me interesting as
Hmm.
opposed to what that number is. But
Hmm.
the clothing is super important
Yes,
because,
please
right.
talk.
Okay. So there are a couple of people, and I know you. So first of all, I love that you do outfit of the day. There are a couple of other people; they know who they are.
Yes.
One's in our town.
Yep.
Ellie Mraz started doing it too. I love it, and I don't always do it because I don't actually. When I work from home, sometimes I'm just staying in my gym clothes the whole day.
Hmm.
But I truly believe, to take a phrase from Gail Style or Gail
Hmm.
Sobel, in the wellness of style.
Hmm.
And what I mean by that is this: I don't care what size you are, literally. And I say this to my friends who I believe, and obviously it depends on what one can afford, but stop buying 7 pairs of pants that don't fit you great. Invest in a really good pair and you will feel awesome.
Hmm.
The better quality fabrics lie better. Don't pull at your hips. They're going to fit. Different styles fit different people better.
Hmm.
And we've all seen the beautiful cashmere sweaters versus the ones that are like getting pilled or whatever. And I think if you really invest in select key pieces,
Hmm.
you will feel great.
Hmm.
And you know, it's at all sizes. I was getting a pair of pants and I was talking to somebody and they said, "Oh, well, I'm not the size of that model." I'm like, "Well, guess what? They make leather pants in all sizes."
Yes. Yeah. It's, I mean, that piece speaks to like the, and going back to what you said about the arms, like, well, I don't have the body for that, or I can't wear that because I'm not that size, right? We have all these beliefs and we've been conditioned to think that only someone who is X size or looks a certain way can wear certain types of clothing, which is just like not, that's like, they're like a made up thing. Like it's just not true. It's a story that we've been told and that we've internalized. And it takes work to move beyond that. But the power of clothing in general, because you can get dressed in something, and my checklist of three things: that I like it, it fits, and it's comfortable, right? Those are like the three things that I'm always running through my head and that I talk a lot about. You can do that at any size and in any shape. And because we can never control the size and shape of our body, we can control what we choose to put on it, how we choose to kind of show up, and using clothing as a form of self-care. And I think that connects so much to what you were saying about like really prioritizing it and choosing one thing that makes you feel fantastic versus seven things just to have like more shit in your closet, or because you saw some influencer wearing it, or because it was on sale, or it's the cool thing at Zara or whatever it is. It becomes a way of paying attention to your body, which can bring up a lot of discomfort, because then you really have to like look at yourself and see what works and what doesn't, and what you like and what's comfortable and whatnot. But I think, is such an opportunity to foster a a more, what's the word I'm trying to think of? I think caring and loving and empathetic and compassionate relationship with yourself, where you use clothing to kind of foster that versus as a way to like avoid it or hide things when we're
It's
wearing stuff.
almost, yeah, I was
Go
gonna say
ahead.
it's almost like a punishment. So
Yeah.
one other thing I did was like I don't need skinny jeans, and I don't mean skinny jeans the way that they taper at the leg. I
Mhm.
mean, if
Smaller size,
this
smaller body
doesn't fit
jeans.
me anymore,
Yeah.
and I don't need it in my closet, or I'm not hoping to that I'm gonna my I don't change my body to fit my clothes. I
Yes.
change my clothes to fit my body. And
Yes.
so if I have things that don't fit me anymore, then I get rid of it.
Mhm.
I sell it on the real and now I get money.
Mhm.
And then I can use that money to buy something that, because it fits me better, I
Yes.
am no longer telling myself, oh, I need to lose weight. I'm telling myself, wow, I look good.
Mhm.
And that one step is huge, right? If
Yes.
every single person listening, and I'm sure everybody has a couple of things, that dress, that this, that, but
Mhm.
I don't care what it is, get rid of it.
Yeah.
It is holding you back. And by the time you get to wherever you want to be, you're going to want to buy new clothes anyway. And if it
Yes.
doesn't, so stop. It's almost like saying you're not worthy of buying something nice for yourself because you're bigger.
Yes. Yes.
Or same thing with sex, by the way. You don't feel good in your body, so you don't want to have sex. Well, guess
Mhm.
what? Right? Are you not worthy of an orgasm because you're in a bigger body? No, of course
Yeah.
not.
Yeah. Yeah, it's like those the clothing, even if it's like put away in your closet, it's taking, it's there, and it's taking up space. And every time you walk in your closet, that pair of pants, the blouse, the dress, whatever, it's there. And it's like it enters your consciousness in some way, and it's this constant reminder of like, I'm not that size, I'm not that person, I'm not in that body anymore. And there is a it's like a it's like a chip away every day that you walk in there, and it's having an impact that you don't even realize. And so even if you have a put away, even if you have it in, like, honestly, I think people are like, well, we'll put it away, like put it in the attic, put it in another closet. And I'm like, like I just like I'm with you. Like, I think it just needs to go. Like, I had a pair, I wrote about this in an email. I had a pair of J. Crew pants from when I'm almost 45. I was in my late 20s, and I had them up until 4 or 5 months ago. And I would keep them in this cabinet where I wouldn't see them all the time, but they were there tucked away in my closet. And periodically I would try them on. And I would know kind of how much weight I had gained or lost based on how those pants fit. And I was like afraid to throw them away. I'm like, if I throw these away, then I won't know. I won't know where I am. I won't have this like gauge or this external measure to tell me if where I am is okay, which is like so fucked up, because that should not be the primary way to be getting information about how you feel about your body. And I finally threw them away, and they're not there, and they're gone. And I talked about it in this email, because it was kind of like a sharing this experience, but also holding myself accountable to doing this. And everything in my closet right now fits and is wearable, and not I would look at that cabinet and I'd know that they were in there and I'd go through this decision, make this in split seconds. Should I try them on today? Should I not try them on today? Should I try them on today? Should I not try them on today? And that would happen on a daily basis. And you don't even realize the ways in which those things are so insidious, the way in which they are impacting you. And so getting rid of them had just created more space for other things, to pay more attention, to enjoy getting dressed more and not have that like cloud hanging over. So I totally, totally agree with you. The clothing is so powerful in both directions, like in the positive way, and it can be in the negative. You know,
Yeah.
it goes both ways.
And there are things that I have that I mean, there was this gorgeous green metallic lace dress that I wore. And at one point I did, I said, okay. And I literally, it's as if I'm saying it to myself.
Mhm.
I say, okay, it doesn't fit me. Guess what? Tailors, and I said this earlier in the
Mhm.
episode, tailors let things out as much
Yes.
as they let things in. And it was interesting. I was in Vail over Christmas and I had a credit at this store. And I went in, I was with my husband and my brother in law, and there was this sort of like suede dress I liked. And I consider myself a certain size in this brand, in this dress.
Mhm.
I tried it on and it looked good. It was a little snug. And so the way I sort of did the test was, when you, if suburban person here, right? I drive a car. So
Mhm.
if I go like this and I'm moving my arms, it doesn't act, it's a little tight.
Okay.
Okay. So if I did the size up, maybe it's a little loose, but then I could belt it. And I couldn't decide. And I ended up getting the bigger one. My husband was like, just get the bigger one, you'll be more comfortable. And I got the bigger one and I wore it the other day. And I was so glad I did,
Mhm.
because that's actually a huge win for me
Mhm.
to not buy, the number of times I go with
Yes.
friends and they're like, well, I'm this size. And I
Yes.
really think that they should try a bigger size. And I don't always say anything because
Yeah.
then it will lie better. And then, by the way, if they decide to go for sushi, and we
Mhm.
were talking about the scale, I mean, that's a whole other thing, which we can get to. But like, what if you eat a bagel,
Right.
right? Or sushi one day and, sushi's healthy, quote
Uh-huh.
unquote. I don't, and, you're swollen,
Mhm.
right? I don't need any of that. I want to be
Yeah.
able to be comfortable in the clothes.
Yes.
And
Yes.
and I think with the food and the clothes, this is sort of a tangent, but sushi made me think about it.
Mhm.
And you were asking me about the things that there was one snippet that really was impactful about like the arms and the
Mhm.
self-fulfilling prophecy. The other one was the scale, and you did a really great episode on this. Actually, maybe it was you who said this, but think of it, it was all about like, what is it really telling you? What is that number telling you? It's not telling you anything. And I think
Mhm.
that woman who's the rugby player was a perfect example about how strong and fit and beautiful she is. And
Yeah.
the number on the scale doesn't say anything. But the other way I look at the scale is, it's almost like a weather vane,
Mhm.
right? You look out, or a thermometer, you look outside and you're like, it's 98 degrees outside.
Mhm.
All it tells you is how hot it is. It doesn't tell you if it's humid. It doesn't tell you the UV. It doesn't tell you anything else. And
Mhm.
it might have been your episode. So if you step on the scale and you're like, oh, okay, it's up 2 pounds, which that annoys me when people are like, I just need to lose 2 pounds, up 2 pounds. Um, you could say, well, that makes sense
Mhm.
because I had Chinese food last night and
Right.
I'm swollen, right? I'm
Yes.
retaining water. So that to me was freeing also to say, okay, the number is this,
Mhm.
that makes sense.
Yes.
I've been enjoying dessert and every day, and even though I exercise, I always like a little dessert, right?
Yes.
It's just, that's to me the way I approach it now, as
Yes.
opposed to being afraid to step on it.
Yes. It's what you're doing is you're looking at it more objectively and like kind of like I call it like fact checking, right? Like you step on the scale's up, and it's like, oh, well, that makes sense because I had a ton of sodium, right? Or, there are lots of different reasons the scale fluctuates, but being able to do that starts to strip away the emotion. So you're not looking at the scale's up, and you're like, oh my God, it was so gross. I ate so much. I gained 5 pounds. Like, no, that's not even physiologically like what happened. And the scale is a representation of literally everything in your body down to the cellular level. It doesn't know the difference between muscle and fat and poop and water and pee and bone and all of that. And those things can fluctuate. I mean, bone doesn't obviously, but a lot of the things the scale is measuring fluctuate on a constant, more frequently than daily, within a day basis. And we lose sight of that, and being able to look at it more objectively, more factually, is such a helpful skill, and it takes practice. Um, but those examples that you shared are such like that's it, like that's it in action. So it's so helpful for people to hear that. Like I love it's why it's so great to talk with women who have been through this work, like
Oh,
started in one place and are not on the other side because to your point, it's ongoing, but have made so much progress because people think that they're just stuck. Like it's not possible for them. I'll never be able to not weigh myself. I'll never be able to not get on the scale and have my mood dictated by whatever that number says. But it is possible. And what you're sharing is how you do it.
you said something really interesting, which is it's nice talking to people who've done the work.
Hmm.
It can be hard sometimes because people will call me, oh, I feel fat today. Oh, I gained
Hmm.
3 pounds. I've been eating so much. And honestly, it's almost a boundary for me at this point. I have to
Hmm.
figure out the right language. But once they hear this podcast, they might know this, which is
Hint,
um,
hint.
so, first of all, to all my friends who say this to me, you know this because I tell you this. You're all beautiful, like objectively, subjectively, right?
Hmm.
Inside and out. And there's not one of my friends who says this to me and they're big, honestly, right? Everybody I know who wears Spanx is small.
Hmm.
It's only the small people who are wearing Spanx. It's not the people who, are very large.
Hmm.
And um, I think that I've started to institute it because it's not healthy for me to be
Hmm.
pulled back into that world. I don't want to. I do want to be there for them, and I try to. And sometimes they'll say, "Yes, I know you're going to be mad at me," but but I say to them, You look great. Like and everybody is sort of like people would kill to look like you, Jordana. People would kill to look like me. People would kill to look like them, right?
Hmm.
So I think you're exactly right, which is when you've done the work, it's really hard to be surrounded by things that
Hmm.
maybe can be triggering, which is why, like with social
Hmm.
media, I hate that for the young girls because they're just
Hmm.
looking at each other and they're thinking someone else's highlight reel is their real life.
Reality.
It's not.
Yeah. Yeah. Women, I feel like con- connect and bond by commiserating over their bodies, right? Like how many times I think to myself, like over the course of my life, where be like, it's like, I'm so fat. Oh my God, no, you look great. I'm so fat. Or like, I ate so much. I was like, you didn't eat anything. Oh my God, I'm the one who like pigged out. And it's like this competition for who was like the quote worst. And there's this way that women have connected over that, which is like when you think about it, is so fucked up that we've been, I mean, taught to do that. That's not something that's innate. That's something that's a learned behavior based on what's expected of us. But it's like learning in some cases like how to connect with other women in that's not about that. That's about building each other up instead of breaking each other down, and not even breaking each other down because it's not even always about that, but it's about breaking yourself down next to someone. It's like talking down about yourself and what you ate or how much you weigh or how you can't wear that thing as a way to like relate to someone else. And that's, I mean, so detrimental to our well-being and to our relationships. But it's like it's a shift, and once you've done that work for yourself, it's like you can't relate to people like that anymore. You don't want to, you can't, you don't need to, but it's like other people are still doing that. So it's like how do you find your place in that? And you and I have talked about this, and I know it's something that you have struggled with and have thought a lot about, is like how when people, family members, friends make comments about themselves or about food, what do you do? How do you respond to it? I was just having this conversation with a friend who was going to Miami with a group of girlfriends, and she was really kind of anxious about, are people going to make comments about my body and what are they going to say? And I don't know how to respond. And it's hard to figure out like how do you set up right? Boundaries are what things that we do. We can't control what other people say or do. We can only control ourselves. So a boundary is how we kind of control and set that line for what we are willing to participate in. And I just think it's such an interesting conversation, and it's different on the person as to like how do you respond when someone says like, "Oh my god, I'm so fat," or like, "I look disgusting in that outfit," or "I can't wear that." You can wear that, but I can't wear that. It's like, what do you do? How do you respond? Um what has worked for you since you've kind of gone through this work in those situations?
Yeah. So I think I have my closest friend. I think of her as thinner than I am. She would say I'm fitter
Okay.
So, and that's the other thing. My why has changed. So we can get to that in a minute because it's not just about looks, right? It's about health. And
Mm-hmm.
I want to be healthier for longer. So when I
Mm-hmm.
want to be 80 taking grandkids in the ocean and swimming. I want to be skiing down a mountain at that age, right? So if
Mm-hmm.
I want to do that, the lifting, and you talk a lot about that. But with this one friend, she's self-aware enough that I was able, and I'm super close with her. We've been friends since 8, right? So I said to her, listen, when you put yourself down this way, it's really hard for me to listen to because I look at you and I think you look so great. And I'm trying to work on myself and not be as preoccupied because, by the way, nobody wants to hear it, right? Like, nobody liked it when I put myself down like that. Like, oh my God, nobody likes that. It's not
Yeah.
interesting. And I told her that it was really hard for me to listen to because when she puts herself down, it makes me more preoccupied about how I look. And I'm
Mm-hmm.
really trying not to do that. And she
Mm-hmm.
says, you know what? I'm really glad that you told me. I won't do that anymore.
Yeah.
Now, she and I have that friendship, and she has that emotional maturity that she can do that. And I knew that I could talk to her in that open, honest way. Not everybody can receive that message.
Totally.
And so I guess I would say some tricks would be like, just you can shut it down. Gosh, I really hate that you feel that way about yourself.
Mm-hmm.
You know, by the way, did you see the article? And then you switch
Switch
topics,
topics. Yes. Yep.
you know. But I think that I haven't mastered that skill yet. But I
No,
think
I'm.
the
It's
adaptive approach based on who you're with, if you can really
yeah.
be close, but I will tell you that friend, her name is Jackie,
Mm-hmm.
and she is one in a million because I would say most people can't respond like that,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. Yeah. It does. It does take emotional maturity and a willingness to kind of really look at your behavior. But I think what the response you said, like, it makes me so sad to hear you talk about yourself that way, right? That's compassion, that's connection. It also kind of communicates that what you're doing is impacting other people, right? Because it does, whether it's a friend or a child's, right? Or a parent, the way that we talk about ourselves, to your point, makes us think about ourselves maybe in that context. And it just continues to like, then we just kind of continue down the same path. We're stuck in the same cycle that we've been stuck in, which is just like how gross we look, how terrible we look, what food we ate that was bad. And it just continues to perpetuate that. Um, so yeah, I think that's a real, and then changing the subject and just moving on beyond it. But I think that's a really helpful and powerful way to respond. That's not like, it's not awkward. You're not telling someone to stop doing it. You're not saying this makes me uncomfortable, right? You're just like, it makes me really sad to hear you talk about yourself that way, which is in a way to me feels like loving and caring and compassionate. And maybe makes them stop and think about, oh, like, why am I talking about myself that way? Right. Even if it just opens up a little bit of space for like reflection and to think about what they're doing, that's amazing because that's where the opportunity for change is.
Yeah, I've used that line like, I really hate you talking about my friend that way,
Hmm.
right?
Yes.
Doesn't always work.
That's yes.
It doesn't always.
I changed the language. Yes. So something you brought up, which I'd wanted to circle back to, so I'm glad you mentioned it, was around this idea of kind of like fitness and health. And you strength train, and obviously have, exercise has been part of your life for a long time. But I'd love to hear about kind of your relationship with exercise, why you do what you do, how it makes you feel, and sort of what role that has all played in this for you.
Yeah. So, I mean, growing up, I played sports, and then I think I probably really got into it when I graduated college. I lived in Israel for a year, and I was volunteering, and I would just go for long walks, or I eventually started running, and then I moved to New York, and there's a big in New York, like a scene where you're, single going to Equinox, and
Mhm.
and I just loved it, right? I felt good emotionally,
Yeah.
and I felt like I had some nice muscles. My body adapted pretty well after the first child, not as well after the second. And that's pretty typical from my understanding, but I don't know if my behavior changed. Although maybe like when I was single, I worked out 2.5 hours a day or something, which is, by the way, a disorder in and of itself, right? I
Mhm.
mean, that's just talks to the craziness of where I was.
Mhm.
So always exercise a minimum of 4 days a week just because I like it. It was
Mhm.
always part of my life. Even now, I do it, but not all my exercise is at a gym, right? We're
Mhm.
a pretty sedentary culture. So I use it now. It's evolved. I started working with this trainer, Charles, who I'm totally obsessed with.
Mhm.
And I think getting the right trainer matters. Um, we do a lot with strength. So if I were doing things that you say, oh, my back hurts, for example, or my hamstring is a problem. Well, maybe it's a problem because I'm over engaging my hamstrings because my glutes aren't strong enough.
Mhm.
Right. So, in general, I fully believe that exercise is the best panacea, will make you feel better. You feel like shit, go for a walk outside.
Mhm.
Go work out. I promise you'll feel better. And I can't say that I always do that, but every time I do, I feel better.
Mhm.
Right. So sometimes it's not about the motivation, it's just the consistency. Just the consistency matters more than the motivation. And
Yep.
so I don't really focus on food so much, but I do try to lift. And I follow a lot of your guidance when you talk about
Mhm.
trying to do, the heavier weights. I
Mhm.
do it to prevent injury, to get stronger. I still do the cardio, but I'm not as cardio obsessed. And by the way, if you're lifting weights the right way, you're getting your cardio
Mhm.
at the same time.
Yeah.
So I just love it. I don't necessarily do it with other people. I kind of do it myself. This
Yeah.
afternoon, after this, I'm away right now and I'm going to go cross country skiing for 2 hours or something like that. And it's just
Yeah.
great. I'm reading this book called Younger Next Year, and I think it probably sums up where I am right now with exercise. And by
Mhm.
the way, if I could work with Charles 3 days a week between schedules and finances, I would, right?
Yeah.
I mean, there's nothing better than getting a good personal trainer. And by the way, if you talk to these personal trainers, like I went to a gym and they were talking to me at my weight loss goals. That's
Mhm.
never a conversation
Yeah.
I have with Charles.
Yeah.
And I know you've partnered with him, and he only talks to me about mobility,
Yep.
strength, doing things in the correct form.
Mhm.
That's what it's about. And even one day, like, it's okay, a little messed up. I still only really wear dark colored leggings because I think that you can see my cellulite through them.
Mhm.
See, not perfect.
Mhm.
And one day I wore gray leggings to the workout pants and we're working out. And he's like, oh, you're wearing a color. And I said, well, you can see my cellulite. He's like, I don't care. I love the boldness. And do you see what I'm
Awesome.
saying? Right. And
Yes.
that's a much more positive
Yes.
trainer. But the book I'm reading, which is called Younger Next Year, it's really designed for people in like the third chapter of their life, meaning you've
Okay.
already learned for 25 years. Now you've
Mhm.
earned for 25, 30 years. And exercise is a new definition. I promise you, when you're 80, I mean, I care for my 90-year-old father.
Mhm.
You want to be able to get up off the toilet so that you can live in
Yes.
your own home. It is a
Mhm.
totally different why. We talked about the pool, we talked about the skiing,
Mhm.
but I worry about especially the women in my lives where they're older and they don't exercise. You
Mhm.
need to trigger enough to break down the bad and build up the good
Mhm.
because there's cellular renewal in your body.
Mhm.
And whether it's the blood or your taste buds or whatever, it all your body changes over time and you have to break down the good. So I have like 3 bulging discs in my cervical spine.
Mhm.
I found when I didn't work out, it made everything worse
Yeah.
versus it hurts. But then I go take this weightlifting class and maybe it was, I really needed to do the farmer's carry. And wow,
Yeah.
that was amazing.
Yes. Yeah. Strength training is so powerful in so many ways from the physiological standpoint of just building strength in your muscle and how it impacts bone density to the mental piece and body image to the pain science piece, which you just talked about with when you aren't exercising, the pain actually goes up and exercising helps kind of, moderate that pain. And the quality of life piece, like over time. I mean, the number of older adults that I know and that just shows up in, in research and in data that can't get up and down off the floor. And like that's become like this normalized thing. Like, and then there's all the, oh, don't hurt yourself. Don't pick that up. You might hurt yourself. And it's like you're actually hurting yourself by not ever picking up heavy things. And it's this negative feedback loop that just, I mean, has created this cultural systemic issue with older adults. And it's never too late to start strength training ever. The earlier you start, the better. So the next best time to start, if it wasn't yesterday, is today, right? No matter how old you are, it's never too late. But strength training is no question one of the most important activities and ways to spend time and things that need to be prioritized for our health and well-being at every age. So yeah,
I mean,
it's
think
really
about
tremendous.
retirement, right? Do you want to go see the world?
Yep.
Do you want, I mean, my
You
dad's
want to be stuck in
90.
your house. Yeah.
When my niece and nephew had their B'nai Mitzvah, a year ago, my mom and dad were up there dancing a storm,
Hmm.
right? And so I literally texted him and I said, "You better be doing your exercises so that you can dance at Charlotte's."
Yep.
Right? That's who you want to be,
Yes. 1,000%, yes.
right?
And
So
it takes effort, it takes time and energy and attention, and it's, so many people default to like, "I don't have time," or "I'm too stressed out," or we have a lot of reasons why we can't do things, and we lose sight of the longer term impact of these things because we're so focused on like the instant gratification of the moment. And it's always going to be easier for most people. It's going to be easier to not exercise in the moment than it's going to be to exercise because it's going to take less energy and less effort to not do it. And it's about learning how to kind of move past that and start thinking about what's happening an hour from now. How am I going to feel an hour from now if I don't exercise versus if I do exercise? And then a month, and then 6 months, and a year, and 10 years. But it's a shift. I mean, this is like what behavior change really is. And I'm kind of going off on a bit of a tangent now, but um, these conversations are just so important to have. And to the extent that if you're listening and you have older adults in your life and you can support them and you can model the behavior yourself, is huge as well. But yeah, strength training is everything.
actually, I think you also did an episode. It's all connected. So you were just saying we're going off on a tangent. Not really, right? It's about retraining your neural pathways.
Yeah.
And you can do that, right? The thing that I'm working on now to retrain my neural pathway,
Hmm.
because um, I'm a work in progress, is my next step is to stop comparing myself versus who I used to be.
Okay.
I can't do all the things physically that I used to do. I can't run 10 miles anymore. I am not the size that I used to be. So I don't really compare. I mean, listen, I'm going to look around and I have friends of all different shapes and sizes. I don't
Mhm.
compare myself to them, right? I don't compare myself professionally. I don't compare myself how I look. I want good things for them. I'm not jealous of them. Who I compare myself to or against is who I used to be. Is when I see those pictures of me in the string bikini and I thought I was fat then. I didn't even know.
Mhm.
And
Mhm.
so I think that that's the next ghost I want to slay,
Okay.
my next rock, if you will. And it's going to take some time, but that's what I'm looking to achieve.
Mhm.
Because aging is not voluntary. It's a blessing, by the way.
Yes,
But
agreed.
how you age, you can
Yes.
choose.
Yes. Yes, totally agree. Um, the one thing we didn't really talk about, which I'd love to spend just a couple minutes on without making this episode too long, because you mentioned a couple of times you have two daughters,
Yes.
seventh grade and 10th grade.
Yes.
Yes, is that right? That's right. Yeah, I'm like, I know
Yeah.
seventh grade.
Think about it for a second.
Um, and I would just, I'm trying to like formulate the question. What are you doing to help them grow up, I guess, with more skills and a different relationship with food and their bodies than you grew up with and that you lived, a good part of your adult life with?
It's a good question. So, first of all, I think my mom did a pretty good job with that. She never
Okay.
put herself down. My parents never talked about foods being
Good or
any which
bad?
way. I
Okay.
mean, to me, I just want a good combination of nutritious and delicious, which is what I tell
Hmm.
my kids.
Yep.
So, I do not, even when I did put myself down, I never put myself down in front of them.
Okay.
That's number one. I don't comment on other people's bodies in front of
Yes.
them.
Yes.
I don't, there's a scale in my bathroom. They've never seen me step on the scale. I do talk about, so my two daughters, one has a much more athletic build, one has a very dainty build. I don't have
Mhm.
different rules. You show your body you love it through the foods you eat.
Mhm.
And I tell them all the time, it's a combination of nutritious and delicious. If it's only nutritious, I'm sorry, but like you're
It
missing out on a
sucks.
lot of fun stuff. And
Yeah.
if it's only delicious, you're not going to be around long enough to enjoy everything.
Yep.
So those are some of the things I do.
Okay.
I think also I sort of joke, maybe this isn't good. I think you're not really supposed to talk about your own body. I guess I do a little bit where I sort of say to them, um, look, if my ass was jiggling or something, it's
Mhm.
just a fact. And
Mhm.
I'm like, yeah, your dad likes a little jiggle. You know, it sounds like, they roll their eyes. We are very, I don't know, body accepting in our home
Okay.
today. Girls wear very short shorts. And
Yep.
to me, I also let them know you sort of wear clothes that make you feel good. So that
Mhm.
all of those are the things that I do. There are a lot of things I could be better at. So I could probably make dinner and sit down as a family for dinner, could be better at that. But I um, really, and my older daughter is like my favorite in how she eats
Mhm.
because I don't restrict. She knows I love dessert. I love,
Mhm.
love, love dessert. I always have dessert in my house. I have whatever they want. I'll buy all of it because similar to alcohol, right?
Mhm.
If they are exposed a little bit to it, then they're
Mhm.
not going to binge on it.
Yes.
And I just say, listen, it's no problem, right? It's just, so because of that, it's not forbidden. And so when I go back to my older daughter, I remember being in the city with her and we would go and she wanted, I was like, let's go to this special place for ice cream or whatever afterwards.
Mhm.
And she looked at the menu and she's like, oh, does that good? And I was like, yeah, it looks delicious. Yeah, go get it. So
Yeah.
she got it. She had some. And then she's sort of like, I'm done.
I'm done.
I
Yes.
mean, to be
Ben is the same.
15, have a nice, most of the time, if I get ice cream, I don't stop. I just eat it till I'm done.
Yeah.
Or if we went, there was another time we went to the theater and we had lunch, just the two of us, and she loves cheesecake. And I like it too. And it was a special occasion. So I said, well, do you want to order dessert? She's like, well, I just want a little bit. I don't want it to be wasteful. You did a great episode on waste because it's
Mhm.
wasted either way. I said,
Mhm.
what's the difference? Order the cheesecake. We're celebrating. I don't even know if it was said we're celebrating. I'm like, order the cheesecake. You'll eat what you want, and then we'll leave the
That's
rest
it.
over. And
Yep.
that's it. And because of
Yes.
that, she does that, right? I think
Yes.
my younger daughter could probably be better in terms of like the food repertoire. But I
Mhm.
always tell my older daughter I love how she does that because she has that ability that babies have, where they're like, they're done. It doesn't matter
We're
if it's
done.
or carrots, they're done. And
Yes.
she's the same way. She's like, I'm
Yes.
done. And I love
Yes.
that. I think it's amazing.
Yes. Same. I mean, thank you for sharing all that. I think it's super helpful for people listening, and that I do the same with Ben. Like nothing is off limits. You want dessert, get dessert. There's snacks in the house. I pack a dessert. This is so funny. I pack a dessert in his lunch box every day. And his friends make comments about the fact that he gets a dessert every day. Like, oh my God, your mom packs you dessert every day. Like, that's so cool. Like, because they're not getting dessert every day. And then his friends will come over to our house and they will raid our snacks. And I have
Yeah.
chips, I have candy, I have sweets, and they will binge it essentially. And I'm not surprised. It makes total sense because they're not getting it at home. And all parents are doing their best. So it's not a judgment. It's everyone is doing what they think is best for their kid. And also there's certain responses that a brain is going to have when we restrict things or there's scarcity. We want more of it. And I think that's one of the most powerful things we can do for kids is to that's how they're going to learn their own innate hunger and fullness skills. Because to your point about babies, we are born with that as humans. It's part of evolution, but it's stripped away from us at a very young age because of all these external things. Well, you didn't finish your vegetables, you can't have dessert. You have to eat 4 more bites. You didn't eat enough, so keep eating. Like these things are well intentioned, but ultimately harmful over time. And we lose that trust with ourselves. And so giving kids permission to have sweets and not labeling them as good or bad is so powerful. and it's like so cool to like see that happening in action. And like I do the same thing with Ben, and it's awesome to watch. Like we'll go to the diner and he'll get a piece of cake and he'll have 5 bites and he'll be like, I'm done. And I'm like, that's fucking amazing. Like
Yeah, it's
I
awesome.
wish every human being could do that. And certainly for some people it's harder than others, but for a lot of people it's very possible. We just have to learn the skills to how to do it.
Yeah.
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 Oh my gosh, it's almost an hour. That went
And
by
I'm a
really
talker.
fast.
I
We
could
could
go
keep
forever.
going. Just thank you. Thank you so much. Like your transparency and your candor and is just so greatly appreciated from me and from everyone listening. It's just this has been a lot of fun and I really just appreciate everything you shared.
Well, thank you so much. I do also want to say, aside from being on your podcast, like I do love your podcasts. I love your approach to health and wellness. And I think you are also a part of my journey, right? There were behaviors I needed to change, and you were a part of that. And I just think that for people who are sort of out there that are thinking about it, you mentioned the word story. The stories you tell yourself, they're just stories and they can be
Mhm.
different stories. And so you have to start gravitating towards the energy. And I gravitated to your energy and I've been all the better for it. So thank you.
Thank you.
Okay.